83 days of Manipur violence. More stories of horror unfold. Manipur angle, nobody's touching. Listen to those who saved Manipur.
The present crisis in Manipur, which has emerged suddenly, the armed forces, the paramilitary forces, the people of Manipur, we all got together and brought it under control.
Army generals who served there. India today reaches areas no one else has. Our top focus on India first.
"83 days into the Manipur crisis, I wanted to get you an important perspective that's been missing in the media's coverage so far. A perspective of a stakeholder that has been at the forefront of keeping Manipur peaceful through a history of tension. If you haven't already guessed, I'm talking about the Indian Army. Manipur became a part of newly independent India in 1949 and became a separate state 23 years later in 1972. Throughout this time, there has been sporadic ethnic conflict. But the creation of the state spawned a number of insurgent and secessionist organizations that were looking for their own independent states. And this was amidst differences between the different ethnicities already existing within the state. In 1980, the Chaudhry Charan Singh government, when he was Prime Minister at the centre, declared Manipur a disturbed area and brought in the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, or AFSPA. The Army and the Assam Rifles, the two main forces deployed to fight insurgents and protect civilians, fought for decades to bring normalcy back to Manipur, especially in the shadow of separatist movements in neighbouring Nagaland. A potent mix of military firmness and a friendly face, resulting in an overarching suspension of operations between government forces and most separatist or insurgent groups. Other than sporadic attacks on the military, including ones in which many troops have been killed at one go, largely by groups finding a safe haven across the border in Myanmar, Manipur had become very calm, almost normal. Calm enough, in fact, for the government to recently lift the harsh AFSPA provisions from several parts of Manipur, a telling sign, if there ever was one, of normalcy. Things were going well until the crisis that erupted in May this year. Army troops have had to be rushed back in large numbers to the state. A military force that ideally shouldn't have any role in internal strife is seeing itself deployed in strength amidst a conflict it was hoping it would never have to participate in. That's the situation right now. The stakeholders are the army, but we're also in a situation where the army must wonder, well, obviously not openly, but the army must wonder through its community whether all the hard work done over decades to bring normalcy into Manipur could be undone by this current crisis. Here are the big questions that we are asking at this point of time. One, could this crisis undo decades of gains by the army and the paramilitary forces in Manipur? Number two, could this crisis push insurgent groups to revive and to regroup? Number three, could China take advantage of the Manipur crisis in some way? Number four, will this crisis ruin India's anti-infiltration drive? We've just heard of over 700 persons infiltrating in from Myanmar in just the last few weeks. Number five, could this crisis revive secessionism in the northeast because the state is seen to be on the back foot and beleaguered? Joining me live to answer some of these questions and throw some light on what are very difficult questions that only an army man can answer. Lieutenant General S.L. Narasimhan. He commanded an army corps in the northeast, very illustrious scholar of army studies and an expert on China. Lieutenant General D.B. Shikadkar, who was the author of one of the most important documents on reform for the military. He also fought insurgency as a young officer in Manipur itself. And Lieutenant General Shaukin Chauhan, who has been director of the Assam Rifles, written extensively about the northeast and served there for many years across different ranks. Generals, thank you very much for being with me. Always a pleasure, and I deemed it important to our viewers that we hear directly, not just from experts, from those who've literally had skin in the game, who've literally served in the Northeast, served in Manipur, and seen the peace or normalcy over there directly affect, their own career progressions. General Narasimhan, I'd like to start with you, sir. You've been looking at what's been happening in Manipur, no doubt. How do you see this situation? And one of the clearest questions one can ask is there a risk that this current crisis could undo, some or all of the good work that has been gained over decades in Manipur, much of it by the army, sir?
Thank you very much, Shiv, to get me on this show, and it has been a pleasure to always interact with you earlier also and now. The situation in Manipur, of course, is no doubt it's worrisome. And the way it started and the way it has spread is even more worrisome. The thing that you asked about, whether in addition to commanding a corps in Dimapur, which also catered for the entire counterinsurgency operations in Manipur, I also commanded my battalion in Manipur.
Yes. So
I had been, before that, I also served as an instructor in the counterinsurgency and jungle warfare school, where I taught about the insurgency in Manipur. So over a period of time, one has seen the situation going ups and down like a sinusoidal curve. You talked about the present situation. Some time ago, you find even in Chudachandpur and in Bishanpur areas, there was a problem between Cookies and Paites, and then they had an issue. Cookie land was a demand which was already existing earlier. So all the work that has been done so far seems to be at least temporarily negated for a period till which we will be able to get this peace going again. The issue that we need to look at is how to bring the situation under control, because this situation actually is what will tell us how these fragile peace, when we create a peace situation in the Northeast, how fragile it is and how it is easy to actually get back to where it started. So what we need to do at this point in time is to look at how to ensure that the violence doesn't take place, how to get the weapons that have been looted or brought back into the accounting, and ensure that peace prevails in Manipur, at least temporarily, before we can get into talks with many of the groups, which the Home Minister did when he came to Manipur. That kind of a thing is something that we need to look at. And the issue that we need to keep in mind is simply that we need to treat it as a temporary phase, and we should work hard to get back to the peace situation that was prevailing earlier than when it started.
Okay, very clear answer that there is a risk of things deteriorating if the imperative of normalcy is not brought back at the earliest, because each passing day, we are on day 83 now, with each passing day, things become more and more unpredictable on those bigger picture issues. General Chauhan, you've been Director General Assam Rifles. You've served in Manipur. You've been, up close. You've had a ringside view of how Manipur has changed over the years. Before this current crisis, things were, as close to normal as it was, probably possible to be. How do you see it, sir? Given the amount of work it has taken to bring Manipur to this stage, General Chauhan, how do you see this current situation and whether it could actually undo some of that good work that you did?
Firstly, thanks for getting me on your show. It's always an interesting, it's always interesting to be on the show to discuss with my peers and people I've admired in my service life. As far as the assessment of the situation is concerned, Shiv, it's important for us to understand that what actually has happened, where and how can the Assam Rifles and the Army control the situation, and how can we bring back peace, and finally, how can we reconcile the two communities. So when this violence in Manipur started, the Assam Rifles were functioning with about almost 8 to 10 battalions within the state of Manipur, including 3 in and around the area of Imphal. And there were 3 units in the area of Chudachandpur, including 2 looking at the IB between Manipur and Myanmar, and 1 inside to look at the counterinsurgency. So in all these forces were very inadequate because a lot of forces of the army had been moved to the borders of Arunachal Pradesh, mainly to deal with the Chinese threat or the PLA, creating problems for us all along the Arunachal belt or along the line of actual control with China. Now, to control the situation, we had to bring these forces back. So that has left a void along our LAC. That's the first issue that has affected our war preparedness or deal with any Chinese intrusion. Secondly, the number of forces in Manipur are inadequate. Thirdly, because we had taken out the OSPA from the Imphal Valley to carry out counterinsurgency operations and to carry out any kind of search missions, especially for the missing weapons, we needed to send out a large number of patrols or a large number of columns.
Right.
These columns had to be accompanied by a judicial magistrate. I was speaking with the Director General of the Assam Rifles a couple of weeks back, and he was telling me that, sir, on any day, we are sending out between 150 to 180 columns inside Manipur.
But, on that specific point, sir, about, you've explained to us how it works and the way that there is a void that has been left as far as force levels are concerned. But do you, as someone who served there, feel that this current situation could damage the good work that has been done over decades, sir?
There is no doubt, Shiv, because we had been able to establish an excellent rapport with the people. We had been able to establish an excellent grid that dealt with the minor problems that happened. But the internecine, inter-community problem between the Kuki people and the Maitis has actually, though we are very well prepared and though we had all the information, has left us a little unprepared to deal with the kind of violence that erupted after May 3rd. That issue, actually, we were fairly unprepared for.
Yeah.
And then to deal with the large number of refugees that had to move, the Maiti refugees coming in from Churachandpur and the Kuki refugees being thrown out from the Imphal Valley, have forced us to create a large number of refugee camps.
Yes, indeed.
We were not prepared for these refugee camps.
Okay, that is a harsh assessment. You're saying that it will definitely have some kind of impact, even though what that impact is going to be may not be, fully visible at this stage. But, as someone who, headed the Assam Rifles, to say that there is definitely going to be an impact is itself a very, very sobering thought. General Shiketkar, as a young officer, in different ranks, you've served there, you've fought the insurgency, sir. As a former army man, how does it make you feel to see this current crisis? It's day 83, and it's not over yet, sir.
Yes, I must compliment you, first of all. The initial introductory remarks which you made, in fact, you summed up the entire issue. I served in Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram during peak insurgency service.
Yes.
64, when Nagaland almost declared independent state. It spread into Manipur, it spread into Mizoram, it spread into Tripura, and Ulfa became the things. My study says, and I have been the Corps Commander of 4 Corps looking after these areas. My understanding is that the present crisis in Manipur, which has emerged suddenly, the armed forces, the paramilitary forces, the people of Manipur, we all got together and brought it under control. It became a peaceful state, and suddenly it has started working.
Yeah.
So much so that our leaders have called Manipur or Northeast as a gateway to East. Manipur provides you the entry into Myanmar, into Thailand and other part. That is the geographical importance. My understanding is there is a footprint of unrest. It is in the control of China. It is in the control of China. MPLA, Manipur Liberation People's Army, Ulfa. Even today, they are in Yunnan province and Kunming. The money is there. The weapons are coming. I had operated against Maungami's gang, which was caught, which was coming back from China. 200 people were caught in Nagaland, and I was terrorizing them. My understanding is There's a long-term strategy on the part of China, and unfortunately, in our own country, we have people who have sympathy not to India, not to the government of India, but to somebody else. That is the problem which is being created. Manipur is Imphal Valley. I know it backwards, General Chauhan mentioned, General Narasimhan mentioned. Very peaceful, loving country. They perform all the rights which are there.
I wanted to.
There's a problem.
General Shekatkar, since you mentioned China, and I'm almost running out of time, I wanted to get a quick word in from General Narasimhan, because he is, an expert on China issues. General Narasimhan, would you quickly weigh in on that? Could China take advantage in some way of what's happening in Manipur?
Two things on this, Shiv. Ever since you gave those questions, I've been thinking about it, even before. One, the insurgency in Manipur as well as in Nagaland and Mizoram was supported by China in the early 60s and 70s. And by about early 80s, that support had dried out. But in between, there are, like the General Shekatkar mentioned, there have been reports of people meeting in Ruili, some support to Ulfa and other things that come up. In that background, and the weapons that are coming in from More and other places in Manipur is actually having Chinese markings, and we have seen that earlier also. But the problem is, it is very difficult to actually pin it on the official support that is talked about from China.
Right.
The weapons are coming, we know, we have raised this with the Chinese also in the past, and they have clearly said that these are probably weapons which are actually not in the official domain. It must be being pilfered somewhere else. So these are the kind of things that we get to hear.
Okay.
But there has been some kind of an influence of China in the northeast was visible when reports emerged as the Chinese operators meeting the underground leaders from India in Ruili. So there is some issue, but how far the involvement in the present situation will be very difficult to actually attribute to anybody as yet.
Okay, understood. It's still a shape-shifting situation. Day 83, it's a much larger number than it should have been ideally. Things should have been brought under control a long time ago. But I can only imagine how, army veterans who've spent careers in the Northeast, are looking at, work being reversed, undone, negated by this current situation that has spiraled out of control and hasn't come to an end yet. Thank you very much, General Narasimhan, General Chauhan, General Shekatkar. I wish I had more time. Unfortunately, this was a short show, but I really appreciate you taking the time out and being with us here on India Today. Well, that's a wrap. As India Today reports the Manipur crisis from all angles, the most glaring perspective of it all is, of course, from the ground. Churachandpur and Bishnupur remain the two epicenters of the violence that is unfolded. However, the situation from the north of Imphal, the state capital, remains a mystery. India Today is the first channel reporting from the northern part of Imphal in Limakhong, where Kuki and Meitei have been in a war zone with each other for the last many weeks. Around 29 villages and more than 20,000 people of the Kuki tribe have been isolated from the mainland due to the conflict. Protests are being held in the valley by women of the Kuki tribe in Limakhong, demanding a separate administration. This is an exclusive ground report by India Today's Ashutosh Mishra.
I'm here in Limakhong area. This is West Imphal. Imagine one district where you have two community people, which is now divided by their community, has literally become a drawn line of control between them. This part where 29 villages, more than 20,000 people are now literally isolated from the mainland. These people need medical attention, they need food, they need everything that any human being requires, but for now it left totally isolated, no help reaching out to them. Even during the victim, they have lost several people, there have been injuries, but for now this part remain unnoticed. India Today is at ground in this part of Manipur to bring you the details and tell you the story how these people caught in the crossfire of the ethnic clashes and now needs a solution, needs a longer permanent solution. Because of the conflict, many of these people have left their homes. Women, children have gone to the safer places. And those who are left here struggling for survival. The reason is, now look at these houses. There's a very old lady who's living here with the family. Almost nothing left now. But the critical, what makes it critical is they are running out of food. Now in this house, this is the only amount of rice which is left, and it is sowing season. Of course, they have to go to 12 hours to Churachandpur to bring. In other cases, usual days, just by going 3 to 4 kilometers in the near West Imphal district, there is a big market, and that have been the tradition. They have been sharing. They're going to sell their vegetables, bring the dry ration here. But as far as dry ration is concerned, what I see here, some amount of rice, which this family could barely survive for another 2 to 3 days. Only vegetables, because they grow locally. That's all they have. And the moment you enter in the kitchen, all I see, this is the only vegetable that they have left. Locally grown vegetable, and there I see the elder lady cooking some food in the chula. There is so that explains this situation and the plight of the poor people who are caught in the crossfire. But as far as the situation is concerned, there are some people who would speak about the current crisis. There are how many such families who are still living in this village and several other villages around, and how are they surviving?
Actually, because of this conflict, this violence, around, I should say 60 to 70% of the households are struggling to get their livelihood. Most of them, I should say, are daily wage earner, and now they are finding it hard to get 2 days a meal even.
What is the name of this lady? I see only this amount of dry ration left.
Yes, they have only this much left, and their livelihood is very, very uncertain. This is also the contribution of some goodwill people from their neighbors.
In our Limakhong area, the people have been isolated. We are in the hills, and no one has covered so far, except the mainstream people. We are very grateful for coming to this distance. And the people are living in just like in a war zone. We could not move out freely. The people are just hanging on in the village with great difficulty. Lot of distress, lot of tension, with hardly any facility to live a normal life.
That's it on India First. Thanks so much for watching.